Hi everyone, Milton here,
Hey, I'm Will.
and we're back with another episode of Heavy Thoughts. And the topic that we wanted to talk about today comes from an article called Who's the Beatdown?
Absolute classic in the world of Magic.
Yeah, and I'm just going to start off by reading a bit from the article itself. This is from a January 1st, 1999 article from the Dojo by Mike Flores.
25 years old.
Yeah, but great stuff.
Absolutely.
So, Who's the Beatdown was the title of the article, and we'll put a link in the additional details section on the video. The most common, yet subtle, yet disastrous mistake I see in tournament Magic is the misassignment of who is the beatdown deck and who is the control deck in a similar deck versus similar deck matchup. The player who misassigns himself is inevitably the loser. You see, in similar deck versus similar deck matchups, unless the decks are really symmetrical, i.e. the true mirror match, one deck has to play the role of beatdown and the other deck has to play the role of control. This can be a very serious dilemma if, say, both are playing aggressive decks. If you are the beatdown deck, you have to kill your opponent faster than he can kill you. If you're the control deck, you have to weather the early beatdown and get into a position where you can gain card advantage.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, so hearing it, it's like, wow, that is very kind of Paleolithic Stone Age level strategy discussion. But if we just take apart all the verbiage about cards and we talk about how this relates to wargaming, we're basically all playing similar matchups.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's asymmetrical but similar,
Correct.
which is exactly what he's talking about.
Right. So the idea of beatdown versus control really expresses itself as tempo versus inevitability.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think about inevitability as if the game state continues to be non-interactive, who will win the game? And the tempo side of things is the alternate to that role, which is because my opponent has this inevitability, how do I use the tempo, the timing of the game, the early pressure in a lot of cases on my opponent's resources in order to interact with them so that I can take the win before their inevitability comes to fruition.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different ways that this can kind of display itself in Kill Team, because there's a couple different ways you can score. Score points with the kill op, the tack op, and the crit op. And there is some hidden information there that your opponent doesn't have until the end of the game. But I think that the easiest way to think about it, when I think about this at least, is like playing against you with your Felgor.
Yeah.
In that they put out a lot of early pressure. They are, in pretty much every definition of the word, the beatdown.
They, in most matchups, have to play the beatdown because they have one role they can play in the game. They have basic one assignment. It is difficult for them to change play styles. Therefore, they give up inevitability in most cases. You have to interact. You have to force pressure.
And so what that means, though, is that if, as the Felgor player, you understand that, you have to apply that early pressure. You have to score while you've got those bodies on the table that aren't frenzied.
Right.
And you've got to use those bodies to trade material with the opponent so that they can't come back in the late game.
Yeah, the idea is you're trying to cripple their resources or their ability to score points in the game.
And from the other side of that matchup, if I'm playing into Felgor, I know that he's the beatdown, right? So, the way that I have to approach the game is to not lose too many resources, to not give him advantageous trades, and to not fall too far behind early that I can't try to catch up later.
Right, and notice we don't talk about what team you're playing. We talk about this matchup dictates this. So even though you might be on a very aggressive team, like let's say your Blades of Cain, right? A team that very much is a beat-down list in most cases. They're trying to force interaction and cripple their opponents because they will get caught out on points. They will just get outbodied and outscored. So because in this particular matchup, you understand the way we interact, you actually perform the role of inevitability and you move to the control side of things and probably play back, play a little more patiently, and score your points on something like Plant Beacons, which is very strong.
Yeah.
So I think the antithesis of the Felgor beatdown, always beatdown, another team that I play a lot is the Farstalker Kin Band. They're almost entirely focused on the inevitability concept of non-interactivity of the game, where you're going to be playing my favorite tack op in the game, which is surveillance, which is just 9 uninteracted points. And if you can keep away from your opponent long enough and deny them kill op pressure, that they oftentimes don't have ways to even enter the game.
Yeah, and so, on the other hand then, if I'm playing into you with your Farstalker Kinband, I know that's how you're going to approach the game.
Yeah.
I know that you've basically got locked in 9 points on surveillance with your primary op. I can't sit back and think that I'm going to play control and stabilize the board state, because you can use your ploy to take crit op points out from under me. Like, I've got to push the tempo of the game.
Absolutely. And
I've got to remove some of your tools from the table in order to stay in it.
Right, and this might mean playing an uncomfortable amount of pressure for some lists and some players, but this is something that we need to identify, A, pre-matchup, but also B, the beatdown can swap in the middle of a match, to use the parlance, right? So, like, you also have to be just doing checks every activation, really, in this game. Am I still the beatdown? Am I still the beatdown? Or have I put enough pressure on my opponent that now I have gained inevitability? When do the roles swap, and how do you understand that information? How do you change your play style within the micro of the game as well?
And the biggest component of that, in my opinion at least, is kind of projecting how many points you and your opponent are likely to score.
Right.
In turning points 2, 3, 4. You've got to try and train yourself to look at the board and be like, okay, he's got models here that I probably can't kill, and so he's going to be in position to plant beacons or surveillance or whatever the tac op is or the crit op. And so it's definitely a learnable skill to kind of see the scoring before it happens.
Yeah, to extrapolate, sort of.
Yeah,
right.
And because we're playing to score points, and that's how you win the game, being able to project who's going to have more of those points is kind of the core of this.
Yeah, those are the best words that we can say. You score points to win the game. And killing stuff is sweet, I guess, right? But ultimately, your thought process inside of the game should be focused upon how do you score points and win the game. Sometimes that will mean removing models, but sometimes it's going to mean the exact opposite of that.
And usually if I'm thinking about killing models,
it is for specific reasons.
Exactly. It's in order to try and deny points from my opponent, or we'll do a separate video talking about like recognizing your win condition.
Yes,
that's a whole another topic.
That's a good one.
But and so you don't just run forward and kill everything you can. The closest models to you. You want to try and kill the things that matter most for the score, whether that's for your tac ops or the crit op.
Absolutely, and conversely, if you are playing an unfamiliar opponent, putting models out there and giving them opportunities to take kills that are meaningless to the score is a very effective way to sort of deny points in a way that most players aren't going to recognize until it's already too late.
Yeah, if you can afford to, and they have to use, if they have to expose a model in order to kill something fairly meaningless, and then you can get them back.
Right. I'm not saying like feed all the time,
Yeah.
but like a calculated feeding of an unnecessary unit, especially if you're playing horde style teams. Like this is ways to just deny activations to your opponent without them realizing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's really the core of what we wanted to talk about with Who's the Beatdown.
Absolutely.
And like I said, the link to the full article will be in there, but that quote from the beginning really kind of encapsulates the main point, in that if you're able to determine if the game stays the same, who's going to win, then you can start to try and change that. But if you can't identify it in the first place, it's really difficult to make the right decisions in order to win the game.
Absolutely. Yeah, process analysis, you really need to know who the beatdown is.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us again today. If you'd like to hear more about some very adequate tabletop strategy, like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again soon.
Cool. Have a good one, guys.